yourselves for a battle of epic proportions between two titans. Feast upon their voices and revel in their words. This is Dueling Ogres.
Hello, Ogres, and welcome to episode 15. Thank you for joining us, as always, on this dedicatory Wednesday afternoon, Earth date August 20th, 2014. I'm your host, Remington Hitchcock, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Brandon Full. Say hello, Brandon.
Hello, Remington.
And also with us today, we have a guest host.
What?
Yes, sir.
That's madness.
I know. Mr. Cody Jones.
Hello.
Hi, Cody.
Hey, can we redo that and you try not to be so bombastic next time?
We're just getting a lot of heavy. You're really, really hot, so.
Hello.
Hi.
So this week, we are going to talk about an issue that has hit close to home this past weekend. It's something that we were going to discuss last week, correct?
Yeah. We had already made plans to talk about this.
And then stuff happened and made us all the more resolute in talking about the topic.
Yes.
And this topic is...
One Direction's new album.
It's great, right? I mean, it's phenomenal. From the front to back.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, even just the cover art.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So good. No, this week we're going to be talking about depression.
Depression? But Remington, I thought depression was just when you were sad.
No, Brandon. Depression is not just when you're sad. Depression is... Now I gotta pull up the notes.
Jesus Christ. At least you were prepared. We sat here for 4 fucking hours at least.
Yeah. No, depression, well, I mean, you guys, go ahead and give me your definition of depression.
Really, I mean, in the simplest terms, it's a chemical imbalance, in my opinion. You know, I mean, you can have triggers, you can have things that trigger depression, but in the end, it's how much, of a certain chemical you got kicking in your brain at the moment,
Yeah, is depression... See, I'm not super familiar with what depression is, technically. It's a lack of chemicals, right?
Yeah.
Is it a lack of chemicals, or is it an overshot of chemicals, or is it...
I think it's...
all of the above, depending.
I think it's just... it's a lack of a healthy generation of them. You might get too much of it, you might not get enough. And I think that's where, like, your bipolars come from. When you go manic, you got too much. And then when you're down, you don't have enough. And then when you're just clinically depressed, you don't even have any mania. It's just, I think it's serotonin.
Yeah.
Of all the information that I have 7 pages of notes. I didn't actually put a clinical definition for it. Yeah. It's probably floating around in there, but for some reason it just slipped my mind.
Well, you did such a good job with the My Little Pony notes.
Yeah.
45 minutes of notes and then a minute and a half of the My Little Pony generation we were actually talking about.
Right,
so
yeah.
I was glad to see you're carrying on that torch of diligent note-taking.
Yeah. I was never good at it in school, and I continue to not be good at it now.
Do you think you would have been better at taking notes had laptops been more prevalent in school? If you could have gone through school and had a laptop right in front of you, do you think you would have taken better notes?
Probably.
I honestly feel like it would have made no difference for me. Like, I don't care if I don't have the motivation to write it down with a pencil. I probably don't have the same motivation to type it.
To type it? It's so much less work to type it, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, I'm a lefty.
Yeah.
And lefties tend to be very heavy-handed.
Yeah.
So if I'm taking a lot of notes, my hand will cramp up something fierce.
Yeah, mine does too. Yeah.
No idea how to get into this topic.
Yeah.
No, it's a tough topic, and I think we should say at the top of the show, I already said it on the Facebook page, which you should like if you haven't, that, we're going to try to make it enjoyable to listen to. We're going to make jokes and stuff, but 2/3 of the people recording right now have been diagnosed with depression. So we are coming from a place of knowledge. Remington, you haven't been diagnosed with depression, but you have enough friends. You have enough sad fuck friends around you that you understand. And you took a lot of notes and stuff.
And on top of that, I mean, I don't think that I have depression, but I mean, I've had bouts where I've been like inconsolably down. where it doesn't seem like there's anything that'll make me feel better, no matter how many of the things that I've tried.
The McRib comes back.
Well, there is a seasonal type of depression. We'll get into that later.
Yeah.
And that is directly tied to the McRib.
We had a friend in high school who suffered from seasonal depression. And you know how we were in high school. We all kind of busted each other's balls and stuff. But I remember this guy telling me in confidence that he was diagnosed with seasonal whatever depression.
Affective disorder.
Yeah, and
sad.
the shortness of it is sad. And I just made so much fun of him. I was just like, oh, so you're sad?
Hey, buddy, you're so
Oh, so you have sad?
you down?
The sun's not out and you're sad? And I mean, I'd already been diagnosed with depression at that point. So I guess
you're
it's
just a prick.
Well, no,
yeah.
I think you're allowed to you're not allowed. It's not a matter of being allowed, but it's kind of like whenever you're like a certain minority, you sort of get a card where you're like, you can bag on, other people. Like if you got depression, you can just be like, hey, you're a sad fuck over there.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's, like I was saying, going into this, I was really nervous because it's a tough topic to discuss because a lot of people suffer from it, and especially with what has happened recently, because we originally were going to do the topic because I suffer from depression, and with Robin Williams killing himself this past week or so, whenever it was, we thought it would be a good time to talk about it because I think that I'm glad to see, since some time has passed, that the media has chosen to focus on depression.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of bring that to the forefront. I was a little afraid it was going to seem exploitive. And then we had a mutual friend who committed suicide just 2 days ago now.
Yeah.
And it just seemed very appropriate then to continue.
Right.
So what I was saying, we're going to make jokes and stuff. But, we're not making fun of the thing itself because it's an issue. But to just listen to us talk about it and be a bummer for an hour or however long we record, that's just not enjoyable,
Yeah, that, and, there's a certain amount of mourning that I'm sure is going to go on, too. And the way that I think all three of us mourn is through humor.
Well, that and
to a certain extent.
And
so.
prolific masturbation.
Well, yeah, there's that, too.
Prolific? Like,
Yeah.
very,
Prolific.
very good at it?
Well, not only that, but just a lot of it, too. Like, I'm doing it right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we always do, so
Yeah.
it's not any kind of
Yeah,
shock.
I fit right in here. I feel, I feel at home here.
Well, you don't fit exactly in. You're going to have to squeeze it, but yeah.
Yeah, it works. It's easing our way into the topic.
So, I'm going to go ahead and cover some symptoms for somebody who's depressed.
Okay.
And maybe you guys can chime in on whether or not you feel any of these at any points when you're experiencing a bout of depression.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. I was also wanting to maybe cover later on, well, with you, Brandon, and myself, when actually you first found out that you had depression, whenever these symptoms became clear, because, it's just, I figured that would be a topic to hit on. When it hit you, what age, and where were you in life.
Yeah, we'll go through some of this stuff with Rem, and then we can maybe get into some personal anecdotes or whatever.
Yeah, because I've got 7 pages of notes that I'm sure I'm not going to hit every one.
I hope you do.
You'd be surprised.
I don't want a repeat of the My Little Pony episode. So some of the symptoms of depression include difficulty concentrating, remembering details, and making decisions. Fatigue and decreased energy, feelings of guilt, worthlessness, and or helplessness, feelings of hopelessness and pessimism, insomnia, early morning wakefulness or excessive sleeping, irritability and restlessness, and I'll cut the list in half here and go to any of you.
Yeah, the latter part of that list, I feel like when I'm in the real deep throes of it, the worthlessness and guilt and hopelessness, those are really big, I think. And
yeah, that's the same here. The first one, difficulty concentrating, remembering details, and making decisions, not particularly for me. I guess making decisions on, like, major life stuff is an issue, but, I mean...
Well, I mean, that may be an issue just for everybody.
Yeah.
But, like, what you want from Subway, It's just like, oh, God.
Yeah.
It's like, if I don't get what I want from Subway, man, it's going to be a terrible day.
Excuse me, I know you're supposed to put 3 meatballs per 6-inch, and there are clearly 5 on here. I got the foot long. I'm not trying to make a scene.
I'm not trying to
But give me my
This
other
is
ball.
all sauce.
I need my meaty balls.
Yeah, I'm just going through a lot right now, and it's hard for me to make this decision, so is it worth it?
So the second part of the list is loss of interest in activities or hobbies once pleasurable, including sex. Overeating.
Well, the thing about sex, I think even in my deepest depression, I could put that aside and be like, you want to fuck? Okay, I could do that.
And that was the most uncomfortable Subway sandwich artist
I'm having
in the
trouble.
tri-state area.
Do you want to fuck? I'm really sad. Do you want to do it? I've lost interest in everything else.
I like that you smell like Black Forest ham.
For some reason, I get an erection.
Keep the gloves on.
Yeah, please.
Overeating or appetite loss.
I've been out of work for a little over a year now. I left my job whenever I had some money saved up, quickly blew through that money, and I think depression is part of the reason, besides just kind of being lazy, that I haven't got another job, and I definitely have gained weight. Probably, I don't know how many pounds, but I've gained a decent amount of weight since I haven't been working. So I would say that's part of it.
Yeah.
I find that when I'm anxious or stressed out, I eat. I find myself eating, I think maybe for comfort.
Yeah.
Persistent, this is a physical symptom. So, persistent aches or pains, headaches, cramps, or digestive problems that do not ease even with treatment. So, taking some Imodium or something like that. Do either of you experience any kind of
I think about that
physical
sometimes. I sometimes if I wake up, because I'm 28, I'm not a spring chicken. I know that with this age there comes aches and pains. That's just. But sometimes I often wonder
they're
if I
only
wake
going to
up.
get worse, Cody.
I know. I hope.
Just
I hope they
just
do.
wait until you get 300 pounds like I am.
But I often wonder when I start noticing these aches and pains, I'm like, am I starting to get into a depression? It's just like, whenever you've had depression for a while and you know yourself, you try to start being super sensitive to the symptoms. In my opinion, I mean, do you find that you look for the symptoms more or?
No, not particularly.
No.
That one doesn't really affect me. Really, I don't find weird aches and pains. I mean, I'm sore sometimes, but that's because I'm inactive more than anything else.
And I think it has to do with certain types of the depression. There are seven different types of depression that we'll get into here in a few minutes. So, but I think that one's more associated with the clinical depression,
like major depressive.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too, is these are all symptoms of depression. It doesn't mean that you're going to have all of them.
Right.
Everybody's
everybody's
depression manifests itself in different ways.
Yeah. These are just symptoms that have been associated with all the different types.
Yeah, like you brought up insomnia. That's one of the major ones for me.
Yeah.
Is I can't sleep and I fight sleep.
But that could just be insomnia too. It might not actually be part of your depression.
And that's the thing about mental illnesses, it's like it's such a vague. It's like a vague
and the thing is, they know that depression is a chemical imbalance.
Right.
But what you said, it could just be insomnia separate. But depression is such like this ethereal thing, this idea that it could just be insomnia, but it could also be a part of it. Is insomnia brought on by part of depression? Is depression brought on partially by insomnia? I mean, it's just so...
I remember something that you told me years and years ago about if you did not get enough sleep, you would go crazy. Do you remember telling me about that at all?
No. Brandon in particular would go crazy, or just in general?
Just in general.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
People who could not sleep
because
would just go insane because your
when
brain
you're up so many days.
Yeah, you snap.
Yeah, your brain takes the information that it's got through the day and during REM sleep processes that information and catalogs it.
Yeah, it puts it into the little, as it were, folders to reference later.
Your mental file system.
I think that's part of the reason why, when you've been up for a few days, you can hallucinate, hear stuff. I think it's because your brain is just overloaded, needs a rest to process stuff. Yeah. So it just keeps bringing stuff up. It's keeping everything in your local memory banks as opposed to putting it into the long-term stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember hearing a while back, I don't know if it was an urban legend or a fact, but it was about a radio host who did a publicity stunt where he stayed on air 24 hours for 13 days in a row or something.
Wow.
And I remember the story going that he was just never right after that. He was just basically nuts.
Well, I'm wondering how interesting that's going to be to listen to after the third day.
You're like, do you guys hear that? You hear it?
What is that? Huh?
It's Satan.
You guys ever think about feet? Really think about feet?
Aren't they weird?
No, I'm asking you guys. You guys ever think?
Anyway, here's the Beach Boys.
Ba 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 ba. The you hear him quietly sobbing in the background.
The last two on the list are persistent sad, anxious, or empty feelings, and thoughts of suicide and suicide attempts.
That I think is the biggest one. Like suicidal ideations anymore after I went to the psych ward. If I ever start thinking that, I noticed and I start paying attention to just my thought patterns in general. Like if I notice that my mind starts wandering in that direction, like I start taking a personal inventory of, what's going on up there.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about that, Brandon? Like,
yeah. Are you talking about like different ways you use personally to combat?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should go through some of the stuff we're talking about here and then get into like after we talk about the symptoms and stuff, then I think we should go on to like ways we personally combat stuff.
That sounds good.
Okay. But yeah, suicidal thoughts. I mean, I think that, and maybe it's just, again, it depends person to person, but I think thoughts of suicide, maybe not suicide attempts, but at least thoughts of suicide just go hand in hand with depression.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever met a depressed person who hasn't at least said once, I've thought about it,
And that's one of the things where I think maybe I might have some sort of diagnosis, because there have been times where I've thought about it very hard, but I also have always prided myself on my ability to just gain control of my feelings and do my best to try and change my mindset about that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll throw myself into it as well.
Yeah.
Just so I can experience it, fight it, and then get back a hold of it and move on.
Yeah. I'm honestly interested to see as we go through the notes and discuss this with you, Rem, because I don't know, we don't really talk about depression a whole lot anymore. We discuss it sometimes when I'm feeling shitty or whatever, but for the most part, it's not like an ongoing topic like it used to be. And I know that for a while we had very different ideas of it.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see, because I know this was years ago, and you can cut this out if you don't
it's
like it, but I know that you had a very strong stance, at least with me, when I was on medication, of just like, you don't need the medication. You had a very strong view of like, you don't really need medication. And I think, would you say that your view has changed, or do you still kind of feel...
It's not the fact that I don't think people should be on medication for it.
Mm-hmm.
And even back then, that's not necessarily how I thought about it. The idea was, I think that doctors tend to prescribe more medication than do therapy for it.
I think that's a safe assumption. I mean... Well, it's all like commission based, They're like, hey, you get these so many pills out, and we're going to cut you a check, big pharmacy.
Yeah. So it's like I said, it's not the fact that you don't need medications to regulate the chemicals in your brain to help you battle that. But I do think that doctors tend to jump the gun and say, okay, let's do some pills and see if that helps, and then if not, we'll get you therapy. Let's try getting therapy first, and then going the pill route if therapy is not doing the job.
The only combination statistically that works a lot of the time is a combination of medication and therapy.
Right.
One or the other isn't going to help. I've done both separately, and they didn't work.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think getting diagnosed medication, which brings about its own problems, the different medications,
Absolutely.
Trying to figure out what works for you and regulating and all the stuff.
That's something I think we should also talk, like, both of our experiences with the various medications we've probably been on since.
Yeah, I've
This may be a long show, too.
Yeah,
so.
I've been on medication. I'm not on any medication right now.
I'm not either.
But there was a period in my life where I was on medication, and I was on, like, 5 different pills.
Simultaneously?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I stopped taking those because they weren't working, but looking back now, part of the reason why they weren't working is because I didn't care if they worked.
Yeah.
I was taking, this is so fucked up. I was on an antipsychotic, and I found I was supposed to take one a day, and I found that if I ate like 6 of them, I would hallucinate. So I would eat.
Well, you obviously take
those.
6. Yeah.
I was like 20, 21 maybe, and was just looking for a cheap high. I was just fucking, still trying to live that high school lifestyle of like, oh, it's cool, and that shit catches up to you, and you look back at your life and realize like, oh, what the fuck was I doing? You know, those were some years I wasted, but
yeah.
So, warning signs of suicide with depression would be a sudden switch from being very sad to being very calm or appearing to be happy, always talking or thinking about death, clinical depression, including deep sadness, loss of interest, trouble sleeping and eating that gets worse, having a death wish, tempting fate by taking risks that could lead to death, such as driving through red lights, losing interest in things one used to care about, making comments about being hopeless, helpless, or worthless, putting affairs in order, tying up loose ends, changing a will.
Which to me seems kind of crazy. Not like crazy in the like, ooh, he's crazy way, but just in the fact that, at least for me, depression manifests a lot in the sense of like, I need to do stuff to move forward with my life as far as getting back in school, and it just seems unattainable and impossible.
Yeah.
And I just stare at it, and instead of taking the tiny steps to start chipping away at it, I just freeze.
Yeah.
You know, so it seems a little interesting or crazy, I guess, to me that depression would manifest itself in that way, but then you decide you're going to kill yourself, and then it's suddenly like, all right, I'm calm. I need to just put my affairs in order and be done with it.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic that you finally, when you decide to kill yourself, get that focus that you've been lacking elsewhere, you know?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Well, I mean, not to belittle it, but it seems like it takes a lot less effort to follow through on suicide than it does to like go through on long-term life goals, you know?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's the easier way out, but I'm going to say it probably takes less effort than, like going through with that stuff.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
the short term, it absolutely does. You know, you see all this stuff in front of you and say, all right, I want to get back into school, but first I have to do this. You know, best case scenario, I can get back into school a year from now.
But
whereas I can take my life this way.
Yeah.
I know what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
No, if you want to kill yourself, you can find a way to kill yourself.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
for as like strong as a human body is, where it's pretty easy to fucking kill one of us.
Right, yeah,
So-
we're pretty squishy.
Yeah.
I think a good analogy is, how good do you feel whenever you put your 2 weeks notice in at a job and you're in like the last 2 or 3 days? It's like, I don't care. I'm not going to be here in 2 or 3 days. I don't have to put up, it's just like there's no anxiety. That's how I feel.
You're elated to
Yeah,
be
and
done with that.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh man, it sucks to be you guys.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah,
I give you
yeah.
props for that. That's really good.
Yeah. Saying things like it would be better if I wasn't here, or I want out. Talking about suicide, or visiting or calling people one cares about. So, trying to get a hold of people and say, hey, we should hang out. Knowing and finishing that sentence with, because I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
we had one of our close friends killed himself 3 days ago now, and a few months ago, another one of our close friends killed himself.
Right.
And actually, just interesting side note, I guess, as we put the old episodes up, in one of the early episodes that Remington and I record, I don't remember which one it is. If you listen through the backlog, I'm sure you can guess. There's one specific episode where I had just found out I was going to the funeral of my first friend, like the day later. And do you remember that episode, Rem?
Yeah.
And through the entire episode, I'm very just like, I've had a shitty week. Remington's going to run this one pretty much.
Yeah.
So, I guess there's that to listen to, but I totally lost my train of thought.
Well, the way that it affects the people around.
Oh, no, that's right. The friend who took his life a few months ago, he contacted people, and he thanked people for being in his life, and for, just little stuff. Thank you for loaning me money. Thank you for this. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And
that goes back into tying up the loose ends.
Yeah, and even at the time, because I didn't hear about any of that until after he was gone.
Yeah.
So even at the time, I think people thought, like, that's a little weird, but okay. Because the guy was always really friendly.
Yeah.
He had his own struggles, obviously, with stuff, but he was always a very friendly guy. Yeah. So it wasn't too out of place for him to call you out of nowhere and be like, hey, thanks for that money you loaned me.
Yeah.
But looking back now, it's always hindsight. You can see that that's what he was doing.
And I think that's one of the points of the episode, is to really put into the forefront those
telltale
signs of what may be an issue and what you should probably start questioning them about and saying, hey.
And actually reaching out. Are you all right?
Yeah.
It's just, it's difficult because when you reach out to somebody, a lot of times that's the last thing they want. They want to feel like somebody cares. But at the same time, I know when I've been in like a really bad depression or even felt suicidal, whenever somebody's like, I care about you, blah, 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 it doesn't feel like it helps me.
No, it doesn't.
I'm fighting it. And maybe if people are persistent, it helps. Or somebody like, come on, let's get out. I came to your house, let's get out. maybe that would have helped me. I don't know. But a lot of times it seemed people just irritate you when they do that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's
irritation
part of,
is definitely one of the
symptoms.
Yeah.
Is the irritability. So
Yeah.
I think
if people with the depression and the thoughts of suicide can recognize that, hey, my irritability is a symptom, then they can take the steps to say, okay, somebody's reaching out to me. I'm going to hang out with them. I know it's going to piss me off. I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it anyway because hopefully they will help me burst out of this shit.
Have you guys ever been, and I don't know, this is just me speaking from personal experience, but have you ever been so damn hungry that you're just to the point where you don't even want to eat? You're so hungry that you feel sick, and beyond a shadow of doubt, if you eat something, you'll feel better.
Yeah.
But if you're too sick, you just don't want to eat. You've gotten to that point.
Because you feel like if you do eat something, you're just going to throw it back up because you're so hungry.
My point is...
the same thing with sleep, too.
Yeah, I feel this way with people. Sometimes when I'm really depressed, I feel like I feel like an outsider. I feel like, everyone's got their little social circles. I'm not involved, Everyone goes to parties. I'm not invited. And of course, it's just cognitive distortions. But I find that even though my mind's like, Cody, don't hang out with anyone, what are you doing? If I actually fight that, and actually hang out with people, 9 times out of 10, I feel way better than,
Yeah, you come home and you say, like, I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, even though you really didn't want to, and it was like pulling eye teeth just to get you out of the door.
Yeah.
It's hard whenever you have that feeling of depression that says, I don't want to hang out with people. I don't care. These people don't give a shit. Because that's where it manifests for me.
Yeah.
It's just like, what the fuck does this person doesn't really care. Either they want to hang out with me because it's a charity case. Or they have absolutely nothing better to do.
Right.
And I'm a pessimistic person by nature.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of a realist. And I know in the back of my head sometimes, yeah, it is kind of a charity case. Yeah, they know they might have better things to do. They want to get me out of the house. And I know that I should be looking at that not as in a way of it's a charity case, but in the like,
that they care.
This person cares.
Yeah.
But I don't. It's hard for me.
And then that goes back to like the cognitive distortions. You don't see things the same way, and that's really a big part of it when it comes to depression. That I don't know if people without depression get is that you look at everything differently. In the simplest form, the cup's half empty, the cup's half full, whatever. That's generally what. But yeah, nothing seems right whenever you're depressed.
Yeah, especially if somebody's reaching out to you because you feel like they're just pandering to you. And you get this sense of like, ugh, I don't want to be pandered to. Fuck you.
Yeah.
So you really push that away. Yeah. But I think it's important to get that realization and say, I don't care if they're pandering to me.
I'll take it.
Yeah. So there are 7 types of depression, as I said before. We have major depressive disorder or clinical depression, both the same thing. Chronic depression or dysthymia. Atypical depression. Bipolar or manic depression. Seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression.
That seasonal affective disorder, like I said, I used to give my friend shit. And I mean, I guess I should go back and kind of time machine it and say I wasn't making fun of the fact that he was depressed. It's just, we always kind of gave this guy shit anyway. Like, in high school, we were probably shittier to people than what we should have been, our friends. But, again, it's high school. And maybe I'm just trying to make myself feel better about it. But, in high school, everybody's you got that testosterone. You don't realize what it is. You're always just butting heads.
Yeah.
You want to make the other person feel like an idiot, even if they're your best friend.
Yeah.
But yeah, seasonal affective disorder is one of those for me that as I've had the hardest time kind of wrapping my head around.
Yeah, it seems like such a silly idea.
Well, they really hurt themselves by calling it sad.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's what gets me the most. It's just like I was diagnosed with sad.
I'm not diagnosed with seasonal affective disorder, but I find that I get most depressed in the winter. But it's not just always that way. I can be depressed any time of the year, but there's a good chance that I'm probably going to get depressed around Christmas time. And I think that's a big thing. And when my cheese slid off my cracker, it was the day after Christmas, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was when I checked myself in.
Yeah.
Do you think, did that have to do, you think, with it being specifically Christmas time or just the time of year in general?
Well, I was working 40 hours a week and I was going to school full time and I was in a relationship And so,
You think she listens to the podcast?
oh God, I hope. Really do. No, I really don't care. I've cut ties, but yeah. So I think it was just a combination of a lot of lousy things, and then like winter was just the big old cherry on that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So the last two are psychotic depression and postpartum depression.
Psychotic depression?
Psychotic depression is delusional thoughts or other symptoms of psychosis that accompany symptoms of depression. Patients usually have a break with the reality and experience hallucinations and delusions. And then postpartum, as many as 75% of new moms get the baby blues, but about 1 in 10 moms develop a more serious condition called postpartum depression. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, or NIM, as I will call it from now on whenever I have to reference it. Yep, NIM. Postpartum depression is diagnosed when a new mother develops a major depressive episode within 1 month after delivery.
That's when some moms will kill their kids.
Yeah.
Like there was the story, it might have happened I don't think it was that recent, it might have happened in the 90s. I watched a documentary on it on Netflix.
Yeah.
About that woman who drowned her 3 or 4 kids because she said that they were going to be possessed by Satan eventually. And she was diagnosed with postpartum, drowned each of them in the bathtub.
Yeah.
And her husband's, the documentary focused more on her husband and him trying to clear his name because in the news, he was attacked a lot. First, because he seemed just really calm about the whole thing. And also, he never stopped defending her.
Yeah.
And, it kind of put him in a light. It featured him on the forefront a lot of like, look, she was my wife. I defended her.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things. I heard another story of a mom, I guess it's a little fucked up, a mom who killed her baby in a microwave.
Oh.
From postpartum depression. And she was diagnosed with that eventually. But what she said happened is she had a seizure, fell with her kid, woke up, and her kid was dead in the microwave.
Wow.
This was, I think, in Mexico.
Yeah.
But she
That's
was
crazy,
diagnosed with it also.
Huh.
So I just feel like in some of these, like with seasonal affective disorder, SAD, postpartum depression, the baby blues, they just really they need to pick better names for it.
Yeah, well, the baby blues isn't the actual depression itself. I mean, the point
folky
was
term.
Well, the point was the
she got the
75%
baby
women at least feel a little kind of downness, not depression, downness.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, you definitely, whenever I was with the girl who had my daughter, I definitely saw that after my daughter was born too.
Yeah.
It just seems kind of, it's par for the course.
Yeah.
So I think if I were to classify my feelings, like I said, I've never been diagnosed with any kind of depression, but I think mine might be atypical if I were to self-diagnose.
Yeah.
Atypical depression has symptoms that include overeating, oversleeping, fatigue, extreme sensitivity to rejection, and moods that worsen or improve in direct response to events.
Now, what does that mean? Like, you're in a good mood, something shitty happens, and like a even-keeled person would take it in stride, whereas somebody with atypical depression would immediately, like, as soon as something shitty happens, they're just like, fuck this sucks.
Yeah, yeah, and that will happen to me on occasion. A lot of times I can take everything in stride.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned last podcast, I'm a very even-keeled person. And,
yeah.
But, I mean, even if I seem that way, there are days where you may see me happy and smiling and acting like my normal self, and I am fighting a battle inside.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know that you've had your own issues to deal with as far as that goes.
So, but I mean, it could have just been a shitty day, so I can't.
And that's hard, and that's what Brandon was saying earlier, that it's like an ethereal thing, and it is. It's very vague, and I personally, I'm diagnosed with a major depressive disorder, but I often wonder if maybe I have the atypical or even bipolar, the second bipolar, not full-on mania.
Right.
But I find that I get really productive sometimes when I'm like recording songs and stuff, but I'm not staying up all night. I'm getting sleep, maybe less sleep than I need.
Yeah.
Like I'll sleep 6 hours and be all right, and then I got when I was playing Magic, I would get really a lot of ideas or whatever I was involved with. I was just creating a lot, but then I find that boom, and I'm just depressed again, and and then I don't want to do anything. Like I got like 5 half projects done,
Yeah.
and I'm just like I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bipolar or manic depression is a complex mood disorder that alternates between periods of clinical depression and times of extreme elation or mania. There are two subtypes of bipolar disorder, bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. With bipolar 1 disorder, patients have a history of at least one manic episode with or without major depressive episodes. And bipolar 2, patients have a history of at least one major depression and at least one hypomanic episode, mildly elated.
Yeah.
See, I was diagnosed just recently with bipolar, but they didn't say whether it was bipolar 1 or 2. Because it was like, I wasn't through a psychology. It's a long story, but I'm going through a government program, and for that I had to have a psych evaluation. And I was diagnosed with bipolar, but it wasn't enough to say, you have bipolar 1 or 2.
It wasn't specified.
Yeah, and they also... anxiety, which I knew I had. I have a lot of social anxiety, which is hilarious that I can do this fine.
Yeah.
I guess maybe it's because I'm not in front of people or doing it.
Well, between that and there is a focus that's involved with this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there is the sense of, which we've talked about before, the sense of pride of creating something, because we're doing more than just hanging out and bullshitting.
Right? Yeah.
We're creating a piece.
Yeah.
To put out to the world. So, there's this sense of completion of a project that goes along with shooting a podcast.
Yeah, and it feels good to complete something. And I mean, I guess while we're on the subject, maybe we can get into, might be a good time a little bit to get into like the stuff we do personally to combat depression. Do you think this would be a good place to?
Sure. If you guys want to go ahead and go do that, I'm going to go take a bathroom break.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll be right back.
Because I think, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Like, creating something like we're doing here.
Yeah.
Makes me feel good to see a finished product up, just in the same way of drawing something or fucking around and learning a new song on your guitar.
Right, yeah, exactly. And, well, I think part of the depression, it's self-propagating because you find that you've lost interest in your creative hobbies when you're in the middle of a depression and you think you're not good at whatever it is that you generally think you're good at. And I think completing it shows you that you have a little bit more control over it than you thought you did prior.
Yeah.
Like, I finished this project. Well, depression hasn't won completely over me.
I find one of the things that I deal with a lot is even if I do finish a product, I can get in those moods where I'm like, this is good. I'm finishing something and I'll finish it and I'll feel great. And then the next day or a few days, I'll go back and I'll look at it and just like, this is shit, and I pick it apart. And I think that's part of it too.
I was reading, I'm subscribed on Facebook to this thing called Brain Pickings. Mm-hmm. It's just like a lot of literature and a lot of people and what they've said about various things. And there was this psychology one talking about how everyone lies to themselves in 3 different ways. Like, we say that we are better than like the idiot masses. You know, it's the same thing that says, oh, well, my friend, not my friend, but someone I knew got cancer, but I'll never get that because I'm different, And well,
everybody who has ever gotten cancer has thought at one point, man, that sucks that person got cancer. I'm never going to get it though.
Right.
Or I hope I don't get it. I probably won't. It happens to other people.
Yeah. And this whole thing that you're lying to yourself, I find that maybe that plays into depression. And so you don't lie to yourself when you're depressed. You actually see things objectively how you are. And that's terrifying. I've taken hallucinogens once or twice in my life, and
once or twice.
And I've had those parts of my brain shut down. The part that lies to you. And after the trip was over, I was so glad for that to kick back on, because looking at yourself
when you see that shit in just the starkest white light.
Oh my God.
No gray areas, just black and white.
And it's just I'm so glad I lie to myself on a day-to-day basis.
Well, what hallucinogens are you talking about specifically?
Mushrooms. Psilocybin.
Are mushrooms one of the things that part of the high is that pumps you with serotonin, kind of like ecstasy does? Because what that could be is when you come down, I know with ecstasy especially, because that goes by flooding your brain with serotonin, that gets that high feeling that you get, like the elated feeling. And I know there's a depression that comes along with when you come out of mushrooms, and I think maybe it's because your brain was so overloaded with serotonin and just all these crazy feelings that when you come down, you have that feeling of depression because your brain, serotonin is your body's constantly producing it, but it has a reservoir built up.
Yeah, exactly.
And then once you're depleted,
Yeah.
it'll build back up, but
It'll
takes
never
a
get
while.
that. Yeah, and it might not even get as high as it did at that time.
Yeah, and I mean, there are people who specifically, there's a type of depression or something where your body doesn't produce serotonin correctly.
And it's because,
And I don't know if that is connected to depression as a whole.
I think it all connects on some level, when it comes to depression. And it goes back to you saying it's very ethereal. It's a vague thing. And so there's a lot of little connections. But when Rem said that the things that we use to combat our depression, I find, and I will talk about, I've taken like speed, like Adderall, like once or twice. And I find that I do feel really bad the next day. And it's because my brain was spiked up with serotonin. And then the next day, I feel so depressed. And 1 year when I was like 23 or 24, I made the connection. And it's such a simple connection. I was like, Cody, you're depressed because that you pumped your brain full of serotonin the day before and you don't have it today. And that alone, just that realization that my depression was caused because of this simple thing, sort of put it in like perspective. And I find that when I'm depressed, identifying that I'm depressed is like a part of the battle.
Yeah. It helps to think of it in a way, at least I find for me to sometimes think of it in a way of like, your body's just kind of a machine, and you have this or you have that, and sometimes the stuff's out of whack, and you need to check your oil, You need to jam a dipstick up there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm talking about finger in a butthole.
Yeah,
but whatever makes you
I'm
feel
talking
better.
a tampon with vodka, man. So, so whatever you need to do to get your rocks off. But yeah, so.
But so you would say that like thinking about that from a clinical way helps you sometimes when you're...
Yeah, if I'm in a depression and I haven't even realized I was in a depression, like right now, I find that I'm getting some of these symptoms, but I don't have the feelings of worthlessness or hopelessness, but I have been sleeping heavy and long, and my appetite's been affected. And I'm wondering, to myself as I drive sometimes, I'm like, Cody, are you depressed? And I'm like, well, if you have to ask, maybe you're not,
Yeah. Well, and I think honestly,
that's
too,
like crazy people thinking that they're not crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, we don't need to get into this at all, but you also have a lot of stuff going on in your personal life that, and I'm not saying that you're doing this, but there are a lot of times where, everybody, no matter how well adjusted, goes through really shitty stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard sometimes for people who don't have depression or don't know people with depression. They'll look at it and say like, well, you're sad, I had this happen, or I had this my grandma died, and it sucked and I felt awful, but, I went out and I went to the bar and I banged a couple girls and, a few days later I felt fine again. So just do that, Just stop being sad. Think about happy stuff.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of cliche at this point, but you still do hear and see that a lot.
Oh, it's hard. And I wanted to also, this is something I wanted to touch on, maybe not right now, but the things that don't help when people say, there's things that you can say to a depressed person that's just completely counterproductive. Like, one thing that
I've got some of that here too.
Yeah, you do?
Yeah.
Cool.
Quit being a faggot.
Yeah.
Wow. Why did you write that so big, Rem?
Don't be such a pussy.
I just so I can read it.
No, I'm just making a joke.
Oh, you're making fun of me.
Yeah.
What should I do if someone I know shows warning signs of suicide? First, if someone you know appears to be depressed and is contemplating suicide, take that person seriously. Listen to what he or she is saying. Take the initiative to ask that person what he or she is planning, but don't attempt to argue him or her out of committing suicide. I mean, this is more about suicide, but it goes hand in hand. Rather, let the person know that you care and understand and are listening. Avoid statements like, you have so much to live for. So go ahead and...
Another one I don't like is, and I know people mean right by this, but it can be so much worse. It's like, really...
Because that's like, thanks for reminding me that what I'm feeling now...
can only get worse.
It can only get worse, and thank you, because it probably will.
Yeah, because now you're like having these projections. You're like, yeah, you're right. It's like I probably have cancer.
I seriously tried to commit suicide once in my life, and I don't remember it. I mean, I guess I can get into it because it doesn't really matter. It was when I was prescribed all that medication, and some of the medication was making it hard for me to sleep. And I was prescribed to Ambien, which is kind of notorious in how people talk about. I don't think Ambien is prescribed nearly as much because you heard the stories of like
People sleepwalking on it.
people sleepwalking and that kind of
I
stuff.
took some last night, actually.
Really?
My sister gave me one.
Did it help you?
Yeah, well, it did. I got kind of like lightheaded, and then I just sent a lot of women messages on OkCupid all night.
Seriously?
Yeah,
like weird messages or like confident messages?
confident. Well, and sleepy-ish.
Yeah.
I sent some sleepy messages.
You want to come ride this cloud dragon with me, baby?
Catch some Z's.
But I was prescribed an Ambien, and this was one of the times where I was spending a few months living at my parents' house. So I was trying to get my head right. Mm-hmm. And I remember I took an Ambien, and I was on the computer waiting for it to kick in. And it didn't. I took another Ambien, waited for it to kick in. That's the last thing I remember. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in the hospital walking, and I have an IV connected, and it's like 24 hours later, and like my consciousness snaps to like in one of those movies or like what is that show where the guy jumps around all the time? Quantum Leap?
Oh yeah.
Like one of those things where suddenly my consciousness jumped into a body and I flipped out in the hospital. Like I was like a zombie, IV in my arm, nurse leading me, and my dad on the other side. And my consciousness came too. I had no idea what the hell was going on. I flipped out and I ripped the IV out of my arm and I started pushing and stuff. So they got me calmed down. It was one of those, like, here, you're in the hospital, here's where you are. And then for the rest of the time, I had to wear a big colored bracelet that said that I would potentially hit people, which I was like, that's awesome. But apparently what had happened is after the second one, I don't remember, I took the rest of the bottle, so like 14 or 15 of them. And apparently it's a lot harder to kill yourself on sleeping pills than what movies would say.
Yeah.
Because you hear that a lot. Like, apparently you can take a lot of sleeping pills and not die. It can cause brain issues, coma, but it takes a lot more than what you would think.
Yeah, and it's a lot harder to snap someone's neck, too, than the movies make it appear.
I've heard that, yeah.
You can tell a lot about a man by how he strangles you.
Yeah.
But the thing was with that is I had written something on MySpace at the time, so however long ago that was, that I don't remember writing. And it made absolutely no sense, but in going back and reading it, I realized that it was my fucked up hallucinating suicide note.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just made no sense. It was talking about like flannel ghosts and stuff.
Yeah.
Like really crazy shit.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was one of those times, I dealt with depression and all that kind of stuff for years after that. But that was one of those moments that kind of put it into like a harsh light for a minute where I was like, what if I had died? Mm-hmm. And that's what I had left behind was this really badly written MySpace note about fucking flannel ghosts and darkness and shit.
Yeah, but I mean, aside from the content, how was the grammar?
It was pretty good, actually.
Well, I mean, that's one.
I pride myself on my grammar.
Yeah,
so.
if you were to go and, I mean, it was grammatically correct, then that's a small legacy.
and again, we're not making light of suicide at all. No. After that, when you're in the hospital after trying to commit suicide, they'll send in a psychiatrist to talk to you to see if you're capable of being let out or whether you should be committed because you're a danger to yourself.
Yeah.
And I 100% lied to the psychiatrist about everything, and I got out that same day because all I knew was I did not want to be involuntarily committed for, I think, 48 hours they can hold you.
Yeah.
Before that.
Oh, man, I got to tell you guys about when I checked myself in, which was at Camden Clark. I was in the ER room, and it was just this horrible room I was in, and this Indian doctor comes in, and I'm not racist against Indians. Not the ones from India, anyway.
Not against Indians.
Yeah.
I mean, you're racist.
Yeah, I'm racist.
Wait, you mean dot or feather?
Yeah. But he looks at me, dude, and, I'm already emotionally weak. It took everything for me to walk in the rain to the hospital.
It's a hard step to get to that point where you admit you need help.
Yeah, because you feel so damn weak. But anyway, he looks down at me, and I'm on this freaking uncomfortable bed, and he's like, so you're gonna kill yourself. And he's like, how are you gonna kill yourself? And he's just yelling at me, like giving me the third degree. How are you gonna do it? And it's just like, whoa, buddy,
Your bedside manner needs some work, doctor.
Like, so you're gonna hang yourself,
Well, I was, but now I'm gonna punch you in the throat with a knife and then kill myself.
I just thought it was so weird, It's just like, absolutely no type of
no tact at all.
just like writing it down on a piece of paper.
Well, and that's the thing with getting help sometimes that sucks, because I think that's, part of what this message is. And again, like, I'm so on the fence because I feel like we're not being exploitive, but I don't know. I mean, everybody everywhere is saying the message that we're saying of, if you feel this way, get help. We're not anything special by doing this, but it's hard to do, especially because there are a lot of people out there that don't know how to deal with it. And you can get somebody like that who's like, so you're going to kill yourself? You're going to hang yourself? All right, just kind of just doesn't understand.
Yeah, just very like abrasive.
And the last thing you want, at least for me, when I have reached out for help before, I don't know what I want. Nobody has ever done it exactly right. I don't know what I want. So maybe there's not a perfect way to do it.
Right.
But the absolute wrong way to do it is that kind of stuff of like, what are you going to do? Are you going to kill yourself?
It was terrible. And then and then they took me up to the behavioral health unit. But, back to what we're talking about, the steps, what you do to combat it personally. I was on a few medications and that helped out a lot. But what I find now that I'm not on them, and I will get back on them if I deem it necessary. If I find that I cannot take care of my mental health by myself, I will take that step. But it's my absolute last step that I want to take is get back on medication. And I'll get into that later.
Just do more hallucinogens.
Yeah. I find that staying, and this goes sort of to my religion, because I'm a lay Buddhist, but I find that staying up on my thoughts, actually observing my thoughts and thought patterns, I find that I just try to stay very vigilant if I find old negative patterns of thought creeping in.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that you'll find that advice everywhere. And it seems like very simple advice, but it is good advice, is to try to recognize the patterns of feeling shitty or feeling depressed and recognize them. And even if you go into them, recognizing that it's happening, I think is a big point.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of willpower to change your thoughts. It does. But I think that it gets easier the more you practice, just like bench pressing.
Yeah.
They went over this thing called cognitive behavioral therapy. Have you ever heard of that, CBT?
I have heard of it. The place where I'm going through now has recommended that that's where I go.
Oh, it's cool.
They've said it's a more like visceral kind of thinking.
Well, basically, it's graphically, it looks like a triangle. And it's your thoughts dictate your attitude, and your attitude dictates your behavior. And you really only have control over your thoughts. So by controlling and changing your thoughts, you can control and change your attitude. And when you control and change your attitude, that's when you change your behavior.
Right.
Do you feel that helps? That helps you?
Tremendously.
Something I've been doing, and I mean, I didn't realize how many times I've mentioned it on the podcast until going back and listening to them, but I've said it probably on 3 separate episodes. Yeah. So I'm going to say it again. Let's go for a baker's dozen eventually.
Yay!
I've mentioned that I'm trying to not be so shitty about things. You know what I mean? Because my natural state, and I think partially depression and partially just because of who I am.
Yeah, your personality.
My basic view is like, ugh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Ugh, like, all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm really trying to take a better attitude with stuff. And like I've mentioned on here before, that's part of the reason why, besides the fact that nobody wants to be around somebody who just shits on everything all the time.
Yeah.
Is I'm trying to change my viewpoint on stuff and have a more like, it's okay to hate stuff, but you should give it a shot first. Like, I shouldn't automatically process things as this sucks, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's just not a good way to live. It's not an enjoyable way, and
it shuts you out to a lot of experiences that you may have found enjoyable.
I'm not having sex with you, Cody.
Oh, okay,
that's
it's enjoyable for myself anyway.
Well, yeah, but I don't see what that's neither here nor there. But
I agree with that. I tend to actually do that a lot myself, where if I'm in a shitty mood, like I was talking about earlier, I work through it, and a lot of that role play happens in my brain where I'm just taking the things that are making me shitty, and I take that step back and I become a third person.
Yeah.
And I look at it and I say, okay, I'm feeling shitty. Over here is why I'm feeling shitty.
Exactly.
And, am I overreacting to this? Is there a different way for me to deal with it? Is there a better, more constructive way for me to deal with it? Mm-hmm. And then I'll take the advice that I'm giving myself and work it into just those emotions to try and get past it.
Yeah.
And I feel that's not a simple feat, what you're talking about, Rem. That's something that you can't just, I don't think that's something you can tell someone to do and they can just do it right off. You know?
Yeah, it is something that I have worked at for many, many years to be able to do something like that.
And I know that you and we've read some of the same, I think, Buddhist books and stuff. And I know you I don't know if you are or not, but I know that you understand some of the mindfulness.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is being taught in a lot of areas, and they find that it helps with stress reduction. And I personally have been doing 2 20-minute meditation sessions a day, right when I wake up and right before I go to bed. Now, generally, if I go to bed too fucked up and that happens, especially since all this shit that's going down, like, I've been running towards anything, really. Well, I won't say anything. I stay away from, crack and heroin, but, just beers, pot, whatever.
Yeah.
Pot.
Say it real soft and they won't pick it up, right?
Yeah. Pot. But
you want to smoke some weed, man?
I find that it helps, just numbing the actual full-on emotions.
Yeah.
And it might not be the healthiest thing, but it helps.
It's not. It really isn't. And, I'm not just saying with pot, I'm saying with anything. Because even though again, I've said 1,000 times, I don't smoke weed, really. Yeah. I mean, I used to smoke all the time. Then it got to the point where, at a party, I was drinking, somebody had a joint. Yeah, sure, let's do it. Uh-huh. Now, I don't really. I mean, there might be once in a blue moon somebody's got, I might hit a bowl once or something, but really it's just not for me, and I don't have any problem with it at all.
Right, it's just not your drug of choice.
I think it's one of the most harmless of things. Yeah. I don't think, I'm not going to get into the whole, they should legalize it, because I'm so fucking sick of that stupid argument.
I am too. Honestly, I am.
But it's just legalize it or not, but when you're marching with fucking dreadlocks talking about how it's not because the weed, it's because hemp you can make pants out of. It's like, nobody's taking you seriously.
There's a car
Put
that
on
runs
a fucking
on water,
suit,
dude.
Stupid hippie.
Yeah.
I want to go in on that and say, me not being a drug user of any type.
Mm-hmm.
I think that...
Well, Mountain Dew.
Well, yeah. I think that something to just take the edge off is okay, but at the same time, that is one of the most fine lines.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, for sure.
So, I mean, I don't think that it's bad or wrong to take the edge off with a little something.
Yeah.
You have to...
But... you can overshoot that line so fast.
Oh, so fast. And I've watched so many people do it. And, honestly, I don't want to say that, I'm not one of the people that does that, but I think that I do all right. None of my relationships in my life that are I think, suffering because I hit a bowl every now and again.
Yeah. You have to be cognizant of the fact that you can't let it control and dictate what you're doing.
Right.
And, this... Does it go into an entire other topic? Addiction? Yeah.
Yeah.
But people who suffer from depression, I don't know if this is statistically factual or not.
It is.
But I feel like people I know who suffer from depression are way more likely to abuse drugs.
Oh, yeah. It is.
It's
I've got
self-medication,
I've got stats, I think.
I find that I self-medicate. And the therapist I had at Westbrook, she, my stuff came back, my blood work, and she's like, I see that you have THC, and I'm just like, yeah, I smoke. I've smoked regularly for many years. And it's almost just like, well, it's legal in 2 states. She's just like, big whoop, basically.
Right. Let me go ahead and go into that. Drug and alcohol abuse with untreated depression. Alcohol and drug abuse are common among people with clinical depression. They're especially common among teens and among young and middle-aged males. It is very important to encourage these people to get help because they are more likely to attempt suicide. Signs of drug and alcohol abuse include inability to maintain personal relationships, secretive alcohol use, self-pity, tremors, unexplained memory loss, unwillingness to talk about drugs or alcohol. Those who suffer depression and abuse drugs or alcohol may need very specialized treatment.
And
that's sorry not to cut you off.
Oh, it's okay.
That's one of the reasons why there is a part of me, especially with marijuana, there's a part of me that says, if that's what you need to help you take the edge off so you can cope,
I
can't say that I want to condone drug use.
Right.
But at the same time, I mean, marijuana has been proven helpful in a lot of different diseases.
Yeah, and some people it piques their anxiety and makes them have panic attacks, but I think it does the opposite to me. It lessens my anxiety, and I think it's because it sort of slows just every process in my brain down just a little bit. And so instead of my mind being on overdrive, worrying about this, ruminating is the clinical term for thinking about the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
Ruminating, I find that, just a little marijuana happens to... Did you like that?
I love how you say it so delicately.
Like your mom's in the other room. Somebody's like, hey.
Well, if she's in the other room, she's probably token too. So. And I just find
Is that where Bob Marley's coming from, blasting through? Buffalo Soldier.
One love. I find that, I think it's kind of hypocritical of Big Pharmacy to be like, oh no, you definitely shouldn't do marijuana, but here's 5 other pills that will probably kill you.
Yeah.
So
say goodbye to your kidneys.
Yeah, take these.
Yeah. This medication that causes or that is supposed to help your depression may actually worsen it to the point where you actually kill
have
yourself.
thoughts of suicide. Yeah. Or like that what's it, Cantrix or
Chantix.
Chantix,
Yep.
Chauncey.
Chauncey. Yeah, the anti-smoking medication.
Yeah, it's just like, oh yeah, also thoughts of suicide. I'm just like, what, really?
Yeah.
It's just like
Chauncey was a powerhouse, though.
Yeah,
if you ran her, you just threw her out while you were giving the potions to the other Pokemon in your party. Just let her take all the damage.
Yeah,
she was awesome.
She was your tank.
Yeah,
she was your tank.
I used Snorlax as my tank.
Yeah, got the little flute.
Yeah. Going back to what you guys were just talking about with chemical dependencies and stuff, I drank for, I would say, probably a good 8 years. I was drinking as a real problem, as you guys know. And I haven't kept track because I don't remember the exact date, but about 1.5 years now. I can't really say I used to be an alcoholic because the idea is if you're an alcoholic, you're an alcoholic. It's just how it works, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of prescribe to that, and I know that I'm not going to be able to I can't just go and have a drink somewhere. I can't go to a bar and like, oh, I just had a drink, I'm fine. That's just not how I'm programmed. But what I found is when I stopped drinking, it was masking a lot of the problems that I had. And in this last 1.5 years, the depression and anxiety and bipolarness have really rocketed to the forefront because now I don't have alcohol to rely on as a crutch to just drink myself to sleep and to just forget about the stuff and hide it,
Yeah.
And that's something that, if you are addicted to something and want to give it up.
Yeah.
That's something I really feel like going through therapy because I didn't. And that's why I'm starting to get into it now. When I stopped drinking, I didn't go through therapy and it was hard for me. And luckily I'm dating somebody who is familiar with it and knows enough to kind of support me in that way.
Yeah, definitely.
But not everybody's like that. And it's hard. Before the girl I'm with now, I was dating a girl who I was drinking during and I was trying to quit and she wasn't equipped to deal with my issues. And that's not on her.
Right.
Because I shouldn't expect other people to.
Exactly.
But that's part of the reason why that relationship ended is because of my dependency on alcohol and she just wasn't equipped to deal with it. Like I said, not her fault at all.
Yeah, and
so
I think I can ring true to that too because I don't think it was, addiction that, because I was in a relationship for 7 years and really the only relationship I was in. And I think it, I don't want to say completely, but part of it was my mental illness that ended it. I mean, because I got out of the psych ward on New Year's Eve, and she left me on New Year's Day.
Yeah.
So it's just like...
Yeah, people aren't equipped to deal with that sometimes.
Yeah, and like you said, it doesn't make them, any worse of a person. Relationships take a lot of dynamics and give and take, and that's a lot of take.
Yeah, that's something that some people just are not capable of working their own way through.
Mm-hmm. And in the moment, like what we keep talking... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Especially with something that is so, ethereal, as we keep saying, as depression, where it can be just out of nowhere and then all of a sudden, fucking shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
And that kind of immediate stressor to the nth degree, people just can't deal with.
Right.
And the thing that we keep talking about as far as, looking at your problem from an outside perspective, like you said, is a lot harder. Like, we understand that saying this, we make it sound easy, just like, well, this is what I do and this is what you do. And this is what you should do, I can say, because I do it myself and it has helped me.
Yeah.
It's not an end all to my issues, but it has helped me a lot. But it's super difficult to get there.
Yeah.
Like
it's like stretching.
If you hear this and you really decide, hey, that sounds like a good idea, and you try it and you can't or it doesn't work, that's nothing against you.
Yeah, keep trying
it's hard. It took me years to get to that point.
Yeah.
Like, just a few days ago, we got on iTunes. You know, I went through everything we got on iTunes, and I was elated. I felt great.
Right.
And then for like an hour or so, I felt really good, and then it just hit me like this dark cloud over me. And that's how I would describe my depressive episodes, is it feels like I almost feel outside of my body, like I'm watching myself in this dark cloud, and I could feel it starting to descend upon me. And I told my girlfriend, I said, you know, I can feel this coming on, and I really want to fight it. What can I do?
Yeah.
And, you know, she helped me out. It ended up coming on anyway, because you can't just do something and suddenly it stops.
Right.
Yeah.
It's something you're going to deal with.
Because it's chemical.
Yeah, it's something that, I mean, at least you have the wherewithal to know that it's coming on.
Yeah,
you know?
that's a big part of it. And I think a lot of people...
It's not that you can make it go away.
It's that you know it's there.
It's that you know it's there, and that your reaction to it is more controlled because you know it's there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that takes...
It takes time with your illness.
It takes time, and it takes, you know, looking at it and not only deciding I want to stop this, because nobody goes through depression not ever thinking I want to stop this, because of course you do.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish depression on my worst enemy.
Well, I would, but that's because I'm hateful and I have an arch nemesis.
Yeah.
But
I really think it's like riding a bike. If you want to try that technique that we were talking about,
there's so many different ones.
You're gonna fail. I mean, you're gonna fail, but you have to get on and keep trying.
yeah.
So, and it takes time and practice. I did not develop my step away from myself overnight.
Yeah,
it's something that I worked at for many, many years when I would lay in bed and I couldn't get to sleep during school, and I'd think about the universe and my place in it and all sorts of different things. At the same time, I was going over, you know, well, okay, I feel shitty today. Why do I feel shitty today? Okay, this is why I feel shitty today. What can I do about that?
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes the answer was nothing. Nothing you could do is going to change this.
Yeah.
And you will just have to survive through it. It's not that you can fight it. It's not that you can tell it to go away. You just survive through it.
Yeah, and when he was talking about like the storm, the low weather system, that's exactly how I think about it too. It's just a storm coming in. I know it's temporary. I know it's not going to last forever.
But that doesn't make it.
It doesn't make it any worse. It's still a freaking
It's like
storm.
living through a fucking tornado.
Yeah, there might be some damages. You're going to have to do some recovery maybe.
One of the things that I do when that comes on is I'm a big gamer. And one of the things I do is I'll throw in my headphones, I'll listen to some music or a podcast, and I'll just play a game and totally switch my mind off. And that, I don't know if that's the best thing to do. Because in a way, I've got audio and visual stimulation. I'm just shutting myself off from everything.
Right.
Maybe that's not the best way to deal with it. I don't know.
Well, I feel like there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's.
I like how you cracked yourself up on that one. You cracked a little
I knew
smile
it was
when
coming.
you said it.
I knew it was coming. But I feel like there's no like best way to deal with depression. If you have something that helps you, but doesn't necessarily freak out your neighbors, that's fine. As long as you're not killing someone's dog or neglecting your own personal relationships. And if you want, I find myself listening to music helps a lot, and I try, when I find myself getting down, I try to stay away from certain types of music, and I try to listen to
Kids pop.
Yeah, I do the same.
Now that's what I call Music 57.
Yeah, I do the same. I do the same thing. I'll put in, I always listen to ska, but it becomes more important to listen to ska when I'm in that shit mood.
Yeah.
So, because it helps me shut it off, and I do the same thing. I'll stay away from certain types of music depending on what is activating my depression. Right. Like I said, I can't really call it that because I've never been diagnosed with it. So, it seems trivial sitting across from two people who have been diagnosed with it, But
well, it is like you're knocking on the door of our exclusive club.
Yeah,
and we don't
hey guys,
and we don't let you in. So you sit outside the door and keep commenting through the window, and we're just like
giving me the stare.
Cody just like peeks his eyes up and hangs up a sign that says "No rims allowed."
Yeah, yeah.
Lines.
Yeah. I mean, is it safe to say to get into the door that I have thought about grabbing the pistol and putting a bullet through my face? Because I've totally been there.
Well, I mean, obviously, we're kidding. It's not like,
Yeah, I know.
we've been diagnosed and you haven't. I know
I
you're
know.
joking
That's
too.
that's
but-
one thing that I wasn't really.
Well, not about that, but
That's one thing I really wasn't too worried about this podcast, but it was something in my mind that I was afraid. I didn't want it to become, like who has more depression than who,
Right,
who's
yeah.
sadder than who,
Yeah.
and so far, it's absolutely not been that. But that was one thing I was wanting to avoid.
Yeah, and I mean, I've dealt with people before who like to take that tact.
Yeah.
yeah.
Who I've dealt with people who I'll explain, in my, barest moments, be talking to them as a friend and explain to me like, yeah, I have depression, I deal with this and this. And what I love is like, you don't have depression.
Yeah.
My uncle, he's got depression. And I hear that, and first off, I'm like, I didn't realize we're in a fucking contest.
I know, it's like his
we're in a sad contest.
yeah,
And that's just it, There's seven different types, and each of those types have a myriad of different levels to it. So you can't
symptoms.
you can't say that one's worse than
Right.
the other. It's
Yeah.
all a
it all
debilitating.
sucks.
Yeah,
Yeah, it really-
it all
they're
really sucks.
They're all a debilitating
Yeah.
thing. What was I saying about?
You were talking.
Oh, I was talking about the music. I will avoid certain types of music, but there are sometimes if my bout has been set off by something, I will embrace the kind of music that I would usually shun,
Yeah.
just so I can
Get those
really,
feelings out.
Yeah, so I can really sink into it. And I'm a singer anyway, so
Yeah.
I will belt that shit
Yeah.
and just feel it. You know?
You have a singing voice of an angel.
Oh, stop it, you!
Sometimes it does.
I don't know what you're talking about.
It does feel good, even when maybe it's not the best way to just like really just get into the shit of that depression, you know? And I'll do that too. Like when I found out yesterday about our friend that had killed himself, I listened to like a few hours of Tom Waits songs over and over. And I mean, I cried and I just, I dealt with it.
You got to get that stuff out.
Yeah, and I mean that goes more to losing a friend,
And going through the levels of grief.
Yeah, is the reaction that, everybody's going to have.
I mean, today, even, like, in a little bit of yesterday, like last night, I even found a little, I was going through some anger, too,
Oh, yeah, I was definitely, I guess maybe should we go ahead, since I brought it up, to just go ahead and bring ourselves to that and dealing with that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
You want to drop in a men versus women real quick?
Girls are gross.
Yeah, totally.
Men who have
We should just kiss boys all the time.
Men who have untreated clinical depression may exhibit more anger, frustration, and violent behavior than women. In addition, men with untreated depression may take dangerous risks such as reckless driving and having unsafe sex. Men are not aware that physical symptoms such as headaches, digestive disorders, and chronic pain can be symptoms of depression.
We're stupid.
Yeah. Honey, why are you being such a dick? Because my head hurts and I have diarrhea!
Irritable, apparently. Yeah, and I think that also depends. I think there's like spectrums of men, and then you got like your manly man who's like emotionally stunted and like stoic and just not capable of expressing that.
I just push all the anger inside until it explodes and I hit my kid.
Like your typical Mark Wahlberg. Anyway,
Marky
on
Mark.
the other end there, you got me.
You got the Wahlbergian kind of man.
You got the Wahlbergian man who just gets angry and doesn't understand anything, and it's just. But then on
And
the
the
other
Codian.
end, yeah, you got us. We're sensitive guys, you know,
yeah.
And that's the way I've always been. I've always been, really, and I think that comes with being like a songwriter and a poet. You have to feel those kind of things more to write about.
When my anger comes out, it's only in the car.
Yeah.
Usually. Yeah, I road rage like a motherfucker.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah. Just stupid things. But that's where I get out all of the pent up frustration because it's a private space.
Yeah.
So
I find out of all the emotions, anger is one that I deal with the least.
Yeah.
And when I do have to deal with it, it's like it's so alien to me to be that angry that I hate it. I'm like, I'm so angry. What do I do right now? I want to punch a hole.
Yeah.
Anything. I'm just like.
and I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
I guess I could punch a hole in something that would hurt my fist.
Oh, I'm so smart.
See, I would say I'm the opposite. Anger is a feeling I feel a lot.
Yeah.
About Most things. And I know, like I said, part of that comes from depression, and part of that just comes from me being kind of an elitist prick.
Yeah.
So that's where my depression, I think, manifests itself a lot is, and I say anger, I don't mean like, fuck, raging, stomping around like Godzilla, terrorizing the Chinese children, but more just like irritation, like mild irritation at almost everything.
Wouldn't that be Japanese?
Huh? No, Godzilla made it across.
Oh, okay. Good. Gojira.
I do deal with irritation. Like if I find that I'm going through a lot of stuff and I'm hanging out with my nephew, he's a freaking sweetheart. I love him. He's like 7, just a sweet kid. But I get irritable and he's like, he's just like, hey, you want to play Minecraft? I'm like, not right now. I'm just like, and I'm thinking to myself, God, I'm such a dick. And I have to sit him down. I'm like, listen, buddy. I'm like, your uncle's going through a lot of stuff right now.
Teaching him about depression. He's 7. He just wants to play Minecraft.
I know, and I'm just like, and I'm just really snappy right now. So
yeah.
Let me tell you about how shitty life is.
It gets worse.
Don't ever grow up.
Yeah.
Start failing your classes so you can stay in school forever.
Aim low. Do drugs. The more, the better. So after high school.
Don't do that, kids.
Yeah. Do it.
Don't. We have a responsibility to all 4 of our listeners.
It's the way you get cool, kids. I'm just you want friends?
So are you guys imagining right now, like, 5 8-year-old kids huddled around a radio listening to us?
What are these drugs? What's drugs?
That one cool kid with the slicked back hair and the cigarettes in his sleeve.
I know what drugs are.
Do you want to smoke some marijuana?
Want to see a dead body?
How about living with people with depression? Living with a depressed person is very difficult and stressful for family members and friends. It's often helpful to have a family member involved in the evaluation and treatment of a depressed relative. Sometimes marital or even family therapy is indicated. Brandon, you mentioned...
yeah, we totally missed out. We could have got every ex-girlfriend ever of mine on here to interview about living with somebody with depression.
Yeah, we could have.
That would have been good.
Yeah, so I mean...
I don't think the icy glares would translate well to audio, though.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. They might be able to hear the icicles forming around.
You couldn't really... it doesn't translate well to audio, them dragging their finger across their neck in the beheading motion that they would be giving me.
I guess we kind of went over that already.
Well, I remember catching a Facebook message from my ex to a friend that she was confiding in when I was going through all the hard times. When the exact message was, "Don't ever date someone with a mental illness." And I'm just like, oh, well, way to make someone feel like a shitheel for something they can't. Absolutely
can't.
I think that comes to the point of no matter how much you want to, it is never a good idea to read your significant other's Facebook messages.
Truth.
Maybe if you think they're cheating or something, I don't know. There's always ways.
Well,
but
that's what I thought.
I have never in my entire life read a significant other's online messages and been like, I'm glad I did that. Ever.
I think you're onto something here.
and it's never stops anybody from doing it.
Yeah.
You're going to do it anyway, but...
I can safely say that I've never gone looking for any particular information.
It's something that I
not looking for any particular information, but you've gone looking. Everybody's going. You bullshit.
I've never gone through anybody's Facebooks or stuff that that they've left up.
Ever.
No, not that I can think of. Not that I can think of at all.
It's
right
not
now.
something that is just de facto what I do. But it was very particular to the situation. Like, I was just getting a feeling, it's just basically, them spending more attention on, everything else.
I've done it before, and it's caused fights. And there's been times where I've done it and found out things that have led to the end of the relationship as far as cheating and stuff goes. Mm-hmm. But there's been times where, is my worst, and I've gotten a whole lot better about doing it, but my worst is we would get in a fight. Then they would go somewhere, and I would get on their Facebook, because most of the time it'll keep up, your password. You just have to type in the email address.
Facebook.
And put in their password and see what they were saying about me right after the fight. And it's never good. But that's what friends are there. That's why they have friends.
Yeah.
Especially if you have depression, you don't want to date somebody who doesn't have friends.
Right.
Because they have nobody to confide to, because those people sometimes need to go to their friend and say, man, Brandon's being a fucking asshole, and get that out and get that out to them and then be like, all right, I got it out. I just needed to get that out, and I can't turn and look at you and say you're a fucking asshole, because that's not super conducive to a good relationship. Right. But yeah, then it leads to me like bursting in like, so I'm an asshole, huh?
Right.
Being an asshole the entire time.
And I think moreover, the reason why I've never done it that I can recall, again, is the fact that I never wanted to run into that situation.
Well, and there's things in life that you're better off not knowing.
Yeah.
There's things in life that you are better off knowing, but there's a whole lot more that you probably never need to know.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
And
it
I
really
think that because I've always had the stance of, I'm not going to go through your stuff. I don't want you to go through my stuff.
Right.
So that is the thing that I always put out. I was like,
I believe that I learned some from this. I'd like to say that I have. So in my next relationship, I think, there's a few things, sort of like when you go through I hate going back to Mario, but you go through a level or any type of side scroller and you die a lot. You sort of like, these are the things I'm not going to do next time.
You learn like, all right, that Goomba is going to be there halfway over that jump. He's going to fall down, and I'm going to have to plan for that.
Don't read my SOS messages, is the Goomba.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's hard to do, and in your next relationship, you probably will at some point, and nothing good will come of it. It's just, it sucks. I try to live now where, I mean, this is so off topic really, but I try to live now where I never say anything on Facebook in a message that I wouldn't want the person I'm dating to read.
Yeah. And I think
that's just a good way to live
that's
life
one of the
in
most,
general.
I think that's one of the most mature ways to deal with, and it's lousy. I feel like and I know, we're getting off the topic, but I think we need, a little bit of levity here out of the depression for a little bit. But I feel like our generation, it's great that we are in such a technological boom, but also I think relationships in general are taking a huge hit with just social networking in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I sometimes wish that I were just not from this generation. I know a lot of people feel like they wish they weren't from this generation, but I wish I was in a generation where really all I had to worry about was the milkman and pool boy. It's just like,
right.
Now you got to worry about everyone they're friends with,
Yeah.
You have an ex-boyfriend from 10 years ago who messages them, and you're like, who the fuck's this? And you're looking at their Facebook, and they're like, oh, they're a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Oh, they run all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
healthy
CEO.
and wealthy and
attractive
wise.
and they're interested.
And mentally sound.
Yeah. I mean, I had
medicated.
With my current girlfriend, we had a situation where we got in an argument.
Yeah.
And we left. I left for a few days. It wasn't like a major breakup argument, but it was just like, I'm going to leave. This is pretty heated. I'm going to spend some time. We can both spend, a day or two alone to process whatever. Again, it wasn't a big deal. It's not like you were cheating or anything like that.
A very healthy conclusion.
Yeah, just a string of arguments that led up to a big one. But regardless, I came back and immediately checked her Facebook messages.
Yeah.
And saw that she had been talking to somebody, not romantically, but talking to somebody about like our fighting and stuff. And it pissed me off.
Yeah.
I go to confront her about it because I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
She then confronts me about Facebook messages I had sent talking to Remington, actually, about the situation and bitching about it. And as we start fighting, we get about 5 minutes in, and then we both slowly realize, like, wait, neither of us were saying anything bad. Like, we were both like, fucking, they're so stubborn, stuff like that. But we slowly realized, like, wait, we were just both healthily venting to other people. What are we arguing about?
And all the things we said were true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brandon, you're kind of a standoffish asshole, and you can be kind of a bitch sometimes. It's all true.
Yeah,
I mean,
objectively,
yeah. As if we can, and I think that's a good part of a healthy relationship.
She said she can't wait to listen to this episode, by the way.
Well, see, and I never say anything that I'm not okay with the person hearing.
Right.
And I think that is the new term of cheating. I believe is saying something to someone that you would be ashamed to like say
to their face
if they found out. Yeah. And that's not necessarily talking bad about him in so much as confiding in someone in such a way that it's pseudo romantic. you know.
Yeah, if you're talking to somebody on Facebook, if you're in a relationship and you're talking to somebody on Facebook and you delete those messages because you don't want your significant other to see them,
Yeah.
there's something there. There's something wrong.
Yeah.
Because even if it's something of you like, man, the fucking being an asshole, you know,
Yeah.
that's stuff that'll cause a fight. You call me an asshole? Yeah, because you kind of are. All right then, cool.
Yeah, right.
You know, handshake. Yeah, when you delete, there's more there. And even if, when I've been in a relationship with somebody and I've seen they've deleted messages, even if it was 100% innocent and they just deleted them because they knew I would be angry they were even talking to somebody, your mind can't help but immediately go to like...
The worst case scenario?
If you deleted them, then what was there?
Right.
Yeah. And I think
that goes to insecurity too, which is tied up with
and
depression
you know what, honestly,
as well.
yeah, that ties back.
that's what I was going to say.
Bringing it all back.
Yep. Ooh.
Full circle, baby.
So
we're professionals here.
Low self-esteem, you know, that's all.
Over analyzing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ruminating.
Right.
I don't think I've ever lived with somebody with depression. I've lived with people who've battled it, but I don't know if I've ever lived. I definitely haven't lived with somebody who at least has dealt with depression to the severity that I deal with it. So I can't really speak to advice of how to live with somebody who has depression. What I would say is, you know, if you really love that person needs you to be there for them.
Yeah.
Clearly. But at the same time, and I think this goes to all relationships, whether abusive relationships or whatever, when it comes down to it, you have to do what is best for you. And sometimes there might be a point where you've exhausted every resource with somebody fighting with depression and it's getting to you and you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that person's okay. You want to make sure that person has a good support network, but that person is going to be able to tell if you're just in it because you feel bad for them. And that's going to feed more into it, you know? I don't think you should feel obligated to stay with somebody just because they're fighting depression, you know? Your happiness comes first.
I feel that if they're in it just because they feel bad for you, I feel like that is basically an expiration date on a relationship. Like, that's not going to last a long time.
Yeah.
Pity staying around ain't going to last, you know?
Yeah. To that end, I mean, you were talking about we've been friends for a long time and I've been there for you through everything that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
So, and it's never been because I felt sorry for you.
Yeah.
It's always been because...
You're a sweetheart.
Well, you're my friend and I love you and I will be there for you whenever you need me.
Well,
and sometimes that means that I don't talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that means me stepping back and you know that I'm here if you want to talk, but, you know, if you're having a shitty day, I don't go out of my way to bother you with something.
Yeah.
The other day when I kind of felt, right after you had found out, I was like, I've got stuff about the podcast that I want to talk about, but I'm not going to burden Brandon with it because it's not necessarily something that he wants to go through right now.
Well, and one of the things that stuck with me is whenever I was in the worst of depression and alcoholism, we stopped talking for a while.
Yeah.
And then as I started to get it more under control and we started talking again, there was a time where I confronted you about it. And I said, you know, it just really hurt my feelings and I don't know why. And what you said was, I couldn't see you go through that because I know that you're better than that person. That wasn't you. And that stuck with me a lot, you know, and that's, again, because we're great at podcasting, that goes back to just depression as a whole, is a lot of times when you're dealing with somebody or dealing with it yourself, a lot of times that's not that person. You know, depression is part of them, but you're not always just dealing with that person. It's not that person's an asshole who finds something wrong with everything, so much as maybe that person's just dealing with depression, and you're not dealing with a person anymore, you're dealing with depression in those instances.
And I think that takes... that kind of realization, I think, takes a higher level of like emotional
awareness
and empathy, and you know, both of those things aren't necessarily in everyone, you know, at high levels. You know, some people just don't, you know, they're like, oh, well, this is obviously about me that they're so angry.
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, in our younger years, you know, Brandon's been fighting with this ever since he was in high school. And in our younger years, there were points in our relationship where I didn't want to deal with it anymore. Mm-hmm. And we didn't. We had a big old fight and we didn't talk. And then you moved off to Milwaukee and I didn't talk to you for
6 months.
6 months,
even when I came back for a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, there was a point where I thought that our friendship was over, but it was never because I wanted our friendship to be over. I never said, I don't want to be friends with Brandon full. I just said, our friendship is over. Maybe one day we'll get back to it. Maybe we won't. But that's how life works.
Well, and, maybe that may not have been the best thing I needed at the time.
Yeah.
But again...
But it was the selfish, it was my selfishness and youth.
Depression, and I truly believe this, depression is a selfish disease.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Well, it is, but I don't think selfish has such a bad connotation to it. But it's because it affects you on such a personal level, it's selfish. It's selfish because it's there. I know this might seem like, okay, Cody, you're talking in circles, but it affects you on such a deeply intimate level that there's no way for it not to be selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, some people, like I said, aren't equipped. Like you were talking about your past relationship. There's all kinds of other stuff there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But part of maybe what it comes down to is the girl that you were dating wasn't equipped to put in the time or deal with it long term of dealing with somebody with a mental illness.
Right.
And that's nothing against her. And it's easy to say, like, oh, they broke up with him because of whatever.
Yeah.
It's easy to say that, but it's not true.
And you can't say, oh, they broke up with that. They're such a shitty person. I'd never do that. You don't know until you're in that.
Right. Yeah.
You don't know until you're in the thick of the shit there.
And it hurt. All breakups hurt. And it takes a while for you to look at things objectively in a big scheme of things. And the way that it was done could have been better. Mm-hmm. But looking back, it's just it happens. And that's the thing. There's no guarantee in a relationship. You're both kind of selfish in that you're both seeking something out of it.
Yeah.
You can work together and you can build a life together and not be selfish. But in the end, you both sort of want something.
Well, yeah, there's a symbiotic symbiotic attachment there.
Yeah.
You're getting something out of the other person.
Exactly.
Well, and I want to get into, since we're talking about selfishness, and I've seen a lot of stuff posted, especially after Robin Williams' suicide, and my opinion on this isn't a popular one, apparently online. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like suicide is a very selfish option. And I've seen a lot of people say it's not, and you look like you're disagreeing with me.
No, it's not. It's not that I'm not saying no, it's not. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I am going to give you my spin on it. And I'm going to give you a personal anecdote.
This is a no spin zone. I'm sorry.
Oh, damn it.
Quit playing with your mic.
Oh, you mean my penis?
Yeah.
Oh. Anyway, yeah, I do. I believe it's selfish. And you know what? I don't care. I'm not going to change how I feel, but I don't feel like all suicide objectively is selfish. I feel that suicide generally from depression is selfish. And I'll tell you, it's because I've had 2 friends who have taken their lives. And you know what? It has affected me deeply, especially the one latter has affected me so deeply, and I've cried and I've hurt. And I don't want them to hurt at all, but at the same time, when I get suicidal ideations, one of the things that helps me is thinking how much I was hurt and how many friends I have who are reaching out to me on Facebook because I'm posting some pretty type of statuses. All those people would probably cry on some amount. They would cry and they would feel really shitty that I took my life. And that alone keeps me around. I don't want to do that. But this is going to be where I draw the line. I think that people with terminal illnesses and who are suffering every minute of the day, I believe that they should have the option to be put down in a humane way. If animals can, I believe that humans should be allowed, but I believe there should be criteria. And because earlier this year, I came back from New Orleans. I moved to New Orleans to start over, but I came back to take care of my mom because she has a terminal illness. She has COPD. And when I got back, maybe a month into it, she took 70 Valium and she tried to take her life. Mm-hmm. And she took 30 blood pressure medication on top of that. And the thing is, it's lousy. I found her, she was in a horrible state and I broke down mentally. But you know what? She has had such a poor quality of life because of her disease that I don't fault her for trying.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing too, is whenever I say I think that suicide is selfish, I mean it in the context of depression.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, you're right. I agree with you. And I think that that's another topic.
Yeah.
I mean, entirely in the context of depression, I think, and I've seen a lot of people say, you know, suicide's not. Some people feel like it's the only way out. And I agree, because I've been there for sure. But it's a selfish option in the way of saying, you know, this is the only way to do it. I don't care that people have reached out to me or they haven't reached out to me.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care what or who I'm leaving behind.
Yeah.
Those thoughts probably don't even enter into people's minds most of the time. And I'm not faulting the person who's committed suicide.
Right.
I know that feeling that they had at that moment, the feeling you have to have
so intense
to do something like that, is intense, and that's all you're thinking about.
Very real.
And you're probably even thinking, because you're down on yourself, it's a very good possibility that you are thinking, this is selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe I'm such a shitty person. I'm even doing this and leaving this
and it's only fueling
fallout behind. Yeah. But I just feel like when it really comes down to it, it's so easy to say, you know, when you're feeling suicidal, think of the people you're leaving behind. Because in that moment, that's just fueling you of like, man, I can't believe how shitty I am that I would even consider this when what I would leave behind. But I don't have to deal with it. And people will really be be happier if I'm gone, or whatever your thought process.
And it's cognitive distortions. It's, you know, what you're thinking isn't necessarily what reality is.
I just, and talking about our friend who took his life just a few days ago, it really bothers me to think, because this guy was very popular around here, you know, and he played a lot of local music, and he was a really talented guy.
Very, very.
And I mean, I knew that I've known him since elementary school, and I knew that he has dealt with mental issues and depression and stuff. Mm-hmm. You just never think people are going to take it that far.
Right.
You know, and he was living with a girl, and, you know, I say that suicide is selfish, and I'm not saying that he was being selfish, especially as close as it is. I'm not saying anything bad about him at all, and I don't want it to sound like that, but it breaks my heart to know, and it's, you know, going back, because some of the people listening to this don't know this guy. Yeah. So to even put it in more of a perspective of, like, to talk about the Robin Williams thing, who you don't know personally, but he created so much and brought you happiness. And locally, this guy was like that to a lot of people with music and just meeting him and stuff. He was locally the kind of person like how you might view Robin Williams if you don't live around here. It's like, he brought me happiness. Even if I didn't meet him personally, the things he created brought me happiness. And to know that, and to just put myself in his mind for that moment of him deciding that. And I don't know if he was drunk or on drugs. I don't know. And I'm not saying that. And I don't want it to sound at all, when I talk about depression or post stuff about depression and addiction, specifically with this guy, I am not even speculating, because I don't know. And I don't want it to sound like he was, because that's not the case. I know he has had problems with stuff in the past, as a lot of people do, but I don't know. I'm not saying that he did. Yeah. But just to put myself in that mindset that he had to have had, like, it's just, you know, it's heartbreaking, because I've been there, and it's like, you know, I joke, but it is one of those, you know, cliche saying, but it's one of those things I wouldn't want to wish on my worst enemy, because it's such an awful feeling, and to know that somebody like that was feeling that is just awful. Yeah. And
I mean, he was such a sweetheart too.
And it's, you know, it's ironic too that it would have cheered him up so much to see just the giant outpouring locally of people, you know, posting pictures and his music, and
that's been a hard part for me, honestly. Like, I've been really, like, avoiding Facebook, just because I love the guy so much, and I hung out with him so much that every time I scroll down, every, like, 2 or 3 inches, it's just like, it just hurts so bad.
It almost, and I mean, and I know I'm coming from a selfish place here, but it almost makes me angry to see, like, and I know this is a wrong way to think about it, but to see people posting the one picture they may have taken with this guy, and like a long thing that has 20 likes on their Facebook of, oh, remember him and blah, blah, blah. When I'm like, yeah, you met the guy once. You didn't know him. Like, you don't get to participate in this, you know, remembrance of him when real people knew him and grew up with him and hung out with him. Yeah. And that's not the way to think, because everybody grieves in their own way. And it's, again, goes back to the shittiness of how I think sometimes, but it makes me angry, which is, you know, one of the things of dealing with loss. But
yeah, I have been getting a little angry, you know, it's just like, I'm mad at him, you know, I find myself getting mad at him, and it's just, and I think that's normal. I think I'm not the only one who probably is sorting these kind of issues and these feelings.
And he affected a lot of people, and a lot of people are dealing with that, and I just, like, last night I remembered that I changed my profile picture a week ago to myself in front of this microphone.
Yeah.
And he commented on that picture, and I hadn't talked to him in probably a couple months, and he commented on it and said something about how I look good or whatever,
Yeah.
And I just, it's those thoughts that I think a lot of people have of like, what I couldn't have messaged him then.
And that's the thing. I think that's something I was thinking about earlier whenever we started this podcast, is almost a kind of survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
Like what, that I could have done something, like, because like, I talked to him like on the 13th and we were supposed to hang out and I didn't. And I'm thinking to myself, how narcissistic can you be to think that maybe if you had hung out with them, maybe that would be, they'd still be around.
Yeah, I thought of the same thing too. Maybe you hung out, or maybe I talked to him and the thing of depression came up, and I said something to him that in that moment where he was thinking about it, he remembered.
Yeah.
Or he had my number and knew he could call me, or whatever, and it's just part of the whole thing.
And you can't think that way, I think, because you'll just eat yourself up.
Yeah, you really, it's a natural progression. It's a natural thought progression, but you certainly can't dwell on it.
Yeah.
Because, the long and short of it is, and it sounds very cold, is that it's over now.
Yeah.
So, like I said, it's a healthy mental progression, but at the same time, you just can't dwell on it.
I just wish I had a DeLorean, 88 miles per hour.
Yeah. Well, you have to put a time machine in it. You can't just get in any DeLorean and go back in time.
Are you shitting me right now?
No, you totally can.
I don't think you paid attention to the movies.
Oh.
All right, so yeah, I think we've kind of exhausted this topic. We're at almost 2 hours, so I guess we can go ahead and wrap up. Do you have anything else to say specifically, Cody? Like, if you could just boil down this 2-hour conversation to something, what would you?
I would say that depression is a lifelong battle. It's something that you don't necessarily have to lose. It's not like, I'm not saying it's any different or any less worse than like cancer or something, but it's something that you can put effort towards. So I say for anyone out there, just keep up the fight. That's all you can do.
Yeah. I would say the one thing I've really taken away from this is that Subway has a large myriad of sandwiches you can choose from, and they have a $5 footlong, but it changes every month. So if you go 1 month and you're not happy with the Black Forest ham, tune in next month because they might have the chicken teriyaki.
I love that
with
shit.
All the fixins, all the onion.
The onion dressing?
Oh, fuck, that stuff's so good. But no, I would say that you're absolutely right. Depression is shit, and it's, that's such a fucking, of course it is.
Yeah.
But it's tough, and if you're going through depression, there are ways to get out of it. I mean, you and I both went through the darkest parts of it, and we probably will at some point in our lives go back to the darkest parts of it.
And that honestly is such a horrifying, in my opinion, as a person who has depression and has had it for a while, that's one of the most horrifying thoughts, is knowing that in the future, it might get as bad as it has in the past.
But the thing I think to take away from what we're talking about really, and the information we'll put out there on the page, is that you're going to get back into those darkest feelings, and the only thing you can do is prepare yourself and to know and to have an armory of ways to deal with it and know, okay, whenever I start sinking into it, this helps. Getting some strange helps.
Yeah, it does.
Or, whatever. Obviously I'm joking, sort of, but,
sort of.
Listening to music or playing games, whatever works for you, find that. And I think naturally, as you combat depression, you start to find the things that help you. Yeah. And as long as it's not destructive, that's the thing. And I think that's
an important point to make.
That's a very important point to make, is
don't just do anything.
The stuff like drinking or drugs help, they do, but in reality, at least from my experience, they're not helping coping, they're masking the problem. And eventually it wears off and that problem is still there and it's a little more persistent and a little angrier that you tried to mask it.
Or you have more problems than just the depression.
Yeah.
Chemical dependence at that point.
Chemical dependence or a failed relationship or, you said something stupid online or you sent a bunch of dumbass messages on OkCupid, whatever you did.
Hey, oh man. Quick anecdote. You can cut this later, but when I was in New Orleans, I got really drunk one night and I totally drunk proposed to Amanda Bynes. Is that her name?
Yeah.
In person?
No, on Facebook. But it turns out I was so drunk, I was proposing to Amanda Burns, and it wasn't you.
Who's Amanda Burns?
I don't know.
Just somebody named Amanda Burns?
And I was like, I loved you and all that, and Nickelodeon, and let's get married. And I'm just like, the next day I'm just like, yeah, you're not her.
Did she reply?
No, she never even looked at it. You know, how's that make me feel? You know, I spent like 45 minutes crafting this, proposal.
So were you being like ironic, or were you just genuinely in your drunken state decided I'm just gonna in a million shot, maybe Amanda Bynes messages me back and offers to fly me to Hollywood or wherever Amanda Bynes lives, and I'm gonna have my princess story at last.
I think she's about broke now anyway.
Liquid courage, dude. That's what I was having, dude.
Oh, one time I got drunk one night and tried to call Steve Buscemi.
Yeah.
I 411'd him. I 411'd him, talked to the operator, and I was like, yeah, Hollywood, California. Buscemi, Buscemi. Like, first off, I have no idea where the fuck he lives, and second, that he's just listed in the phone book where somebody answered, and it was like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So, maybe midnight in California. I guess there's a 4-hour difference there or whatever.
Hey, Steve, I just want to say I loved you in Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, and even then, even if all of those things lined up and he answered, what's he gonna say? Who the fuck is this?
Yeah, because if he was in California and I take it you were here,
Yeah.
it's 3 hours behind, so it's like midnight,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And he's just like, I don't know what he's doing, watching The West Wing or something.
What was your favorite, Steve? What was your favorite part of Fargo? The part where I got paid.
Click.
All right. So anyway, Remington, do you have any last things to say? Really?
I'll go ahead and finish off with a fact. More than 80% of people with clinical depression can be successfully treated with early recognition, intervention, and support. Depression affects almost 19 million people each year, including a large portion of the working population. People with untreated depression can usually get to work, but once there, they may be irritable, fatigued, and have difficulty concentrating. Untreated depression makes it difficult for employees to work well. Most people do best with depression treatment using psychotherapy, medications, or a combination of both. So, and to that end, I will go ahead with the wrap-up.
Oh, yeah. Before you do the wrap-up, and we'll say, goodbyes, the friend we talked about who just took his life a few days ago, his name was Joseph Hale. And yeah, he was played in a lot of bands. He was a songwriter. And I mean, I think you can agree, Cody, as you're a musician and songwriter yourself, that he was just insanely talented as far as lyrics.
It was a whole other level.
Any instrument, like he was mainly piano at first.
Yeah.
And then he started to learn guitar. As far as I know, never learned chords, just picked up a guitar and knew what sounded good. He wrote a lot of music. So at the end of this episode, I'm putting one of his songs, one of my favorite songs of his, on there. And then on the Facebook page, we're going to put a link to his, I think it's Reverb Nation, is where he hosted his music. And you can go there and listen to it. I think there's something in the works as far as setting up some sort of charity or something for him. I don't know. I think it's still in the planning stages. So I'm not entirely sure. But of course, we'll post any relevant information when we know more. But in the meantime, one of his songs is going to be at the end, and you can go and listen to some of his music on Reverb Nation.
And I highly suggest you do it. I mean, he was a talented person, and if we can make him live on, it's definitely through the enjoyment of what he left.
Yeah, and I feel like, real quick too, I guess I should have said this earlier, we also had a friend of ours, like I said, who took his life a few months ago. We didn't really go into talking a lot about him, not because it's any different that he took his life, but just because Joseph's was more recent. It's still more on our mind.
Right.
Before we had more time to cope with our last friend a few months ago, so it's nothing against him or the reason why we haven't talked about him before. It's just, we're talking about what's more recent, and it's a shame regardless of who it is.
Yeah.
And to that end, this week's shout out goes to all of you who struggle with depression, anxiety, and thoughts of suicide. We want you to reach out to anyone you can. Friends, families, clergymen, teachers, helplines, therapists, even us. Accepting help from someone does not make you weak. Using tools people are willing to give you to make yourself healthier, that's real strength. A battle is not one against another or one against the world. A battle consists of multiple flanks to suppress and defeat the enemy. Let those who offer help be your flanks and don't fight alone. Head on over to suicide.org to find a suicide hotline in your area, and remember, ogres, to never fight alone.
Well, there's a fat chance in hell I'll be passing my probational test.